The day started out like any other. Warm sunlight streaming through the blinds, birds singing outside, and my daughter Lily's laughter filling the house. She was 7, full of life, curious about everything, and the kind of kid who made every morning feel lighter. We'd just moved into this new neighborhood a few months ago, and I was trying hard to make it feel like home. It was one of those HOA neighborhoods, with strict rules about everything. Trash bins, lawn length, mailbox paint, even how long your car could be parked on the street. It felt suffocating sometimes, but the area was clean and supposedly safe, so I tolerated it. From the start, though, one person stood out, the woman everyone whispered about. Her name was Karen. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, though technically, she was just a board member. But you wouldn't know that by how she acted. She patrolled the streets every morning like she was some kind of neighborhood sheriff, snapping pictures of lawns, sending violation notices for things as minor as a leaf out of place, and threatening fines for disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. Everyone feared her temper, and most people just tried to stay out of her way. Unfortunately, that was easier said than done. It all started with a letter. A plain white envelope tucked under my front door with the HOA logo stamped on it. Inside was a notice claiming I owed $450 in late HOA dues. The funny thing was, I had already paid them 2 weeks earlier. I checked my online bank statement, printed the receipt, and even highlighted the transaction date. Confident it was just a clerical mistake, I decided to bring it up at the next HOA meeting. But before that meeting ever happened, Karen showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning. I remember vividly. I was grilling pancakes for Lily when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there she was, Karen, standing tall, sunglasses on, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her face twisted into that familiar smug smirk she always wore when she thought she had power over someone. "Mr. Reynolds," she began in a tone dripping with condescension, "you're now officially delinquent on your HOA dues. We've sent multiple notices. If you don't pay immediately, further action will be taken." I calmly told her that I had already paid, even showing her the proof. But she barely glanced at the paper before snapping, "That's not my problem. Until it's cleared in our system, you're in violation." Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You wouldn't want to rack up penalties. They add up fast." I could feel my patience thinning. "Karen, I'm not paying the same fee twice. I've got documentation. Take it to your treasurer or whoever's in charge." She scoffed, "Oh, I am in charge," and walked away like she'd won some kind of battle. That moment should have been the end of it. But with Karen, things never stopped there. Over the next week, I started getting harassment letters. Notices of fines for made-up reasons, grass too high, garage door left open, trash bin visible from the street. None of it was true. I kept track of everything, planning to report her to the HOA board. But the situation escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. One afternoon, I was in the garage fixing a shelf when I heard Lily scream from the front yard. My heart nearly stopped. I dropped everything and ran outside. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. Karen was standing on the sidewalk, pointing a handgun straight at my little girl. Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, clutching her stuffed bunny. Karen's voice was trembling with anger. "Tell your daddy to pay his fines, or I'll have the sheriff come down here myself." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I rushed forward, shouting, "Put the gun down. What the hell are you doing?" Karen jerked her hand back, startled. But she didn't lower the weapon. Her face was flushed red with rage. "Your daughter was trespassing," she yelled. She stepped onto my grass. "This is private property. She's 7. I shouted back, pulling Lily behind me. "You pointed a gun at a child over grass?" For a split second, the reality of what she'd done seemed to dawn on her. She looked down, her hand trembling slightly, then quickly holstered the weapon and barked, "Control your kid. Next time I'll call the cops." Then she stormed off. I immediately knelt beside Lily, holding her as she sobbed into my chest. My hands were shaking. I'd dealt with HOA nonsense before, but this crossed a line no sane person could ever defend. I took her inside, locked the doors, and called the police. My voice was trembling as I explained what had happened. The operator assured me an officer was on the way. While waiting, I checked our doorbell camera footage, praying it had captured the confrontation, and it had. The video showed everything: Karen pointing her gun, shouting threats, and my little girl crying in terror. That was all I needed. When the police arrived, I showed them the footage. The officers watched silently, their expressions tightening with disbelief. The senior officer finally muttered, "We'll take it from here." They went straight to Karen's house, which was just a few doors down. From my porch, I watched as they knocked, then started questioning her. She argued, gesturing wildly, but her words didn't matter. Within minutes, they put her in handcuffs. I wish I could say I felt relief right away, but mostly I felt shock. The neighbors had started to gather, whispering among themselves. For years, Karen had terrorized this community with her power-tripping rules and fake fines. Now they were watching her being escorted to a police car, her face pale and eyes wide with disbelief. When the car pulled away, I finally exhaled, holding Lily close. She was still shaking, but at least she was safe. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't done trying to ruin our lives, and the HOA wasn't happy that I'd called the police on one of their own. That night felt endless. Every small sound outside made me tense up, and every time Lily stirred in her sleep, I found myself checking the window to make sure no one was out there. My house had never felt unsafe before, but after what happened, I couldn't shake the fear that Karen might somehow come back. The neighborhood that was supposed to be peaceful now felt poisoned by her madness. The next morning, I received a call from a local officer. He confirmed that Karen had been booked for brandishing a firearm and threatening a minor. But, he added, she'd already been released on bail. The words hit me like a punch. Released? After pointing a gun at my daughter? The officer assured me that she'd face a court hearing soon, but I couldn't believe that someone could walk free so quickly after doing something that horrific. I knew I had to take action to protect my family. I installed new security cameras around the house, one on the driveway, one over the back gate, and another near Lily's bedroom window. I even added a motion light that lit up the entire yard if anyone came near. My wife suggested we move out, but I refused. If we ran, it meant Karen and her kind of people had won. No one should be allowed to intimidate families like that and still live freely without consequences. 2 days later, a letter appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. It read, "You think calling the cops makes you brave? Wait till the HOA is done with you." I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't signed, but I knew exactly who it came from. The phrasing, the arrogance. It screamed Karen. My first instinct was to march straight to the HOA office, but something in me said to document everything first. So I took photos of the letter, time-stamped it, and even emailed it to myself as proof. Later that evening, I decided to attend the emergency HOA meeting that had been scheduled for the week. I walked in holding my phone, ready to show the footage of Karen's actions to everyone there. The room fell silent as I entered. At the table sat the board members, 3 of them, including the president, an older man named George who always seemed to side with Karen. "Mr. Reynolds," George said, his voice formal and cold, "we've heard about the incident. But before you accuse anyone of wrongdoing, we want to remind you that this is private HOA business." "Private?" I repeated, incredulous. She pointed a loaded gun at my child. "That's not an HOA issue, that's a crime." George sighed like he was the one being wronged. "Karen has been a dedicated board member for years. If something happened, I'm sure it was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? I could barely contain my rage. "You want to see the video?" She aimed a gun at my 7-year-old daughter's head. "You call that a misunderstanding?" Some of the neighbors in the room started whispering. One woman looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Another man muttered, "If that's true, she's done." I played the footage on my phone, holding it up for everyone to see. The moment Karen's gun appeared on screen, a collective gasp swept through the room. George's face turned pale. He cleared his throat, fumbling for words. "Well, this is certainly serious," he stammered. "We'll, review it internally." "Internally?" I snapped. "No. This is going to court. I've already filed a report. And if any of you try to cover for her, you'll be part of that case too." That got their attention. Suddenly, no one could meet my eyes. George muttered something about adjourning the meeting, and everyone shuffled out in silence. I knew then that I'd just made a few powerful enemies. The next morning, my car's windshield was smashed. A rock sat on the hood with a note taped to it. "You don't belong here. Drop the charges or move." That was the final straw. I called the police again, filed another report, and sent all the photos and messages to the detective handling Karen's case. He promised they'd look into it. But days passed, and nothing happened. Meanwhile, Karen's smug face returned to the neighborhood like nothing had ever occurred. I saw her standing in her driveway, watering her flowers, smiling like she hadn't traumatized a child. It took every ounce of willpower not to march over and confront her again. But I kept telling myself, stay calm, stay smart. Let the evidence speak. Then one afternoon, while Lily was inside drawing, I heard Karen's voice outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw her standing there with another woman, talking loudly on purpose. "He thinks he can sue me? I've got friends in this HOA. He'll be gone before the month's over." The other woman just nodded, clearly too afraid to disagree. Karen laughed, that same cruel laugh that always made my blood boil. That was it. I'd had enough. I went back inside, pulled out every document, photo, and video I'd gathered, and started building a case. I contacted an attorney specializing in HOA abuse cases and handed everything over. The unpaid fine letters, the threats, the vandalism, the footage of her pointing the gun. When the lawyer saw it all, he shook his head slowly. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "It's criminal intimidation. And if we can prove the HOA tried to protect her, they're going down with her." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. For weeks, we gathered evidence, interviewing neighbors who had been bullied by Karen. Turns out, I wasn't her first victim, just the one who fought back. She'd fined an elderly couple for excessive garden decorations, reported a teenager for noise pollution because of his guitar practice, and even threatened to tow a disabled veterans van because it didn't fit the community aesthetic. The more I learned, the angrier I became. This wasn't about one gun incident. It was about years of unchecked power, bullying, and corruption. And I was going to make sure she finally faced consequences for every bit of it. A few weeks later, things in the neighborhood felt tense, quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Neighbors kept their blinds drawn, and when I walked Lily to the bus stop, people would glance our way but quickly look down. Some of them wanted to support us, I could tell, but they were scared. Karen had built her little empire of fear carefully, and no one wanted to become her next target. Meanwhile, my lawyer was gathering everything we needed for court. He filed both a restraining order and a lawsuit, one against Karen personally, and another against the HOA for negligence and intimidation. It was risky, going after both, but I wasn't backing down. My daughter still woke up crying from nightmares, and every time she saw a black SUV like Karen's drive by, she'd hide behind me. No child should live like that. Karen must have heard about the lawsuit because she showed up at my driveway one afternoon like nothing had happened. Her confidence was unreal. She strutted up to me with her sunglasses perched on her head, that same fake smile plastered on her face. Well, she started, folding her arms. "Looks like you're trying to make a big scene out of nothing. You know, you're not making any friends around here." I set down the toolbox I was holding and faced her. "You're lucky I'm even talking to you and not letting my lawyer handle everything. You pointed a gun at my kid. You should be in jail." She chuckled coldly. "I was defending my property. Your daughter stepped onto my lawn. Maybe teach her some respect before you start throwing accusations." I felt the rage boiling up, but I stayed composed. "You keep telling yourself that when the judge sees the footage." Her smirk faltered for just a second before she leaned in closer. "You're making a mistake, Reynolds. You think the HOA will stand with you? They won't. They'll bury you in fines, and by the time this is over, you'll wish you'd never moved here." She turned and walked off, heels clicking on the pavement, her words echoing like a threat. I stood there, watching her disappear into her house, and realized something. She really believed she was untouchable. But I had something she didn't: proof. Over the next few weeks, my attorney and I built the case layer by layer. We subpoenaed HOA financial records, pulled security footage, and even interviewed former board members who had quietly resigned because of Karen's bullying. One of them told us something that made my stomach turn. Karen had been falsifying violation notices to collect extra administrative fees from residents. Thousands of dollars had gone straight into her own account. We gathered everything, filed it officially, and the court date was set. When the day arrived, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread through the community, and nearly half the neighborhood showed up. Some were there out of curiosity, others because they'd suffered under Karen too. Lily stayed home with my wife, but she gave me a small bracelet she'd made out of beads, whispering, "For luck, Daddy." I promised her that by the end of all this, she wouldn't have to be scared anymore. Karen walked into the courtroom in a sharp gray suit, acting like she was above it all. Her lawyer, a smug-looking man in his 50s, walked beside her. She didn't even glance in my direction. When she took the stand, she played innocent, pretending to be a victim of harassment and character attacks. "I only ever tried to keep our neighborhood safe," she said, feigning tears. "People like Mr. Reynolds move in and think they can ignore the rules. His child was on my property. I was scared. I acted in self-defense." The audience murmured, clearly disgusted. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood up, calm and collected, and began presenting the evidence. He started with the video, the same one from my doorbell camera. The moment Karen appeared on screen, gun in hand, shouting at my daughter, the courtroom went dead silent. Even the judge's expression hardened. Karen's face went pale. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge shut him down instantly. Then came the HOA records. My attorney presented proof of her fake fines, personal payments, and intimidation tactics. The judge asked the HOA president, George, to take the stand. The man looked nervous, sweating under the courtroom lights. He admitted he had ignored complaints against Karen because she was persuasive. The judge's voice was cold when he said, "Persuasive isn't the word I'd use. Complicit, perhaps." By the time it was over, Karen's mask had completely shattered. The judge declared her guilty of multiple charges: brandishing a firearm, child endangerment, and fraud. She was sentenced to serve time and ordered to pay restitution to every homeowner she'd extorted. When the gavel came down, I felt something inside me finally let go. Months of tension, fear, and anger, all released in one deep breath. I looked at her one last time as the officers led her away in handcuffs. Her expression was blank, her pride gone. As I stepped outside the courthouse, several neighbors came up to me. One elderly woman shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "You did what we all were too scared to do," she said softly. "Thank you." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I just did what any father would. That night, when I tucked Lily into bed, she smiled for the first time in weeks. "Is the bad lady gone, Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "She's gone, and she's never coming back." Lily hugged me tight, her little bracelet jingling on my wrist. For the first time in months, our house felt like home again. But the story didn't end there. The HOA tried to distance themselves from Karen, acting like they'd never supported her, but the lawsuit had already exposed their corruption. Within months, the board dissolved completely, and a new one was elected by the community. I didn't plan to join at first, but after everything, I realized someone had to make sure people like Karen never got power again. So I ran for a seat and won. The day I took my seat on the new HOA board, I couldn't help but think how things had come full circle. The same room where Karen once barked orders and dished out fines now felt completely different. There was no arrogance, no fear, just neighbors who genuinely wanted to fix what she'd broken. We didn't wear name tags or demand people follow absurd lawn rules. Instead, we talked about making the neighborhood safe again. People were still shaken by what had happened. Some families had been scared to even open their blinds while Karen was around, worried they'd get cited for something ridiculous. The trauma she caused lingered like a dark shadow over the community. But with her gone, light started to seep back in. Neighbors began talking to each other again, sharing stories of what she'd done and finally laughing about how ridiculous some of her rules had been. One afternoon, while reviewing old HOA documents, I found something that made me stop cold. A thick folder labeled "Complaints Ignored." Inside were dozens of letters from residents. Handwritten, typed, even some on notebook paper. People had begged the board to do something about Karen years before. She had threatened, fined, and harassed them too. And each complaint had been stamped dismissed. I realized then just how long the system had been broken. For years, one person's ego had turned a peaceful neighborhood into a place of fear. I knew that had to change permanently. At the next community meeting, I brought those letters with me and set them on the table. This, I said to everyone gathered, is what happens when people are too scared to stand up to corruption. No more ignored complaints. No more power trips. From now on, this neighborhood belongs to all of us. The applause that filled the room wasn't loud or dramatic. It was real, grateful, honest. People were ready for a new start. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I received a letter in the mail, not from the HOA, not from a lawyer, but from the county prosecutor's office. It informed me that Karen's appeal had been denied. She would be serving her full sentence. There was also an attached statement she'd written as part of her required apology. Her words were stiff and emotionless. I regret my actions and the harm they caused. That was it. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. No real remorse. Just empty words. But I didn't care. Justice had already been served, and my daughter could finally live without fear. That night, Lily wanted to camp out in the backyard under the stars. It was the same yard she used to avoid after what happened. As we set up her little tent and roasted marshmallows over a small fire pit, I watched her giggle and dance around with her flashlight, her innocence fully restored. "Daddy," she said suddenly, looking up at the sky, "do you think the bad lady's thinking about what she did?" I smiled softly, poking the fire. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." She nodded and went back to roasting her marshmallow, humming a tune she'd made up. Seeing her happy again was worth every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every battle I'd fought. When she finally fell asleep beside me, I sat there for a while, staring up at the stars. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. The crickets chirped, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, and for the first time, I felt like the world had set itself right again. In the days that followed, I kept receiving messages from people across nearby neighborhoods. Word had spread about what happened, and families dealing with their own HOA tyrants were reaching out for advice. Some wanted to know how to fight back. Others just wanted to say thank you for standing up when they couldn't. I never wanted to be some kind of hero. I just wanted my daughter to be safe. But if our story could help others realize that no one is above the law, then maybe something good came out of all this madness. As the months passed, our neighborhood transformed. The new HOA implemented fairer rules, lowered unnecessary fees, and even started hosting small community events, barbecues, movie nights, gardening workshops. People came together instead of hiding behind fences. The same street that once felt like a battleground now sounded like laughter and smelled like fresh barbecue. And every time I saw Lily riding her bike down the block, waving to the neighbors who used to keep their heads down, I felt proud. She was brave through all of it, braver than anyone her age should ever have to be. One evening, I was walking the dog when I noticed an old moving truck parked at the house Karen used to own. A young couple was unloading boxes, smiling and waving as I passed. I stopped and said hello, welcoming them to the neighborhood. The woman smiled. "We heard the last owner wasn't very nice," she said with a laugh. I chuckled, shaking my head. "You could say that. But she's not coming back." As I walked away, I glanced one last time at the house that had caused so much trouble. The lights were on now, bright and warm, and for the first time in a long time, it looked like a home again. Not a symbol of fear, but of renewal. That night, sitting on my porch, I realized something important. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about giving people back what someone else tried to take away. Peace, trust, and safety. Karen thought she was unstoppable, but in the end, her own arrogance destroyed her. Now, her old kingdom had become a community again, a place where my daughter could grow up without fear and where no one would ever be allowed to abuse power like that again. And as I looked up at the night sky, hearing Lily's laughter echo through the open window, I whispered to myself, prison suits her better than power ever did. For the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully, knowing that the nightmare was truly over, and that justice had finally found its way home.